now we need to think more about the food security.
Food security.
Food security.
After significant disruptions arising from the war in Ukraine have set media ablaze with doom and gloom predictions, it's food security, but not necessarily food, that is on everyone's lips.
But beyond the headlines, what is really going on? Are we facing a food shortage in the EU? Let's take a look.
So what exactly are we talking about when we say food security? Well, food security is the measures of an individual's ability to access food that is nutritious and sufficient in quantity. It is a concept carved into the European treaties and, together with farmer support, takes center stage in the EU's main farming subsidies program, the Common Agricultural Policy. Indeed, the CAP, which is turning 60 years old this year, was conceived to support the farming sector after years of devastating war in Europe. And some of the policy's original goals, included in the Treaty of Rome, were basically increasing productivity and stabilizing markets, ensuring the availability of food at reasonable prices. In 2 words, food security.
But at least for a hot minute, it seemed that food security was off the menu, or at least that it took a back seat. And this is reflected in the most recent CAP reform, which has shifted the focus somewhat to place more emphasis on environmental practices. But the war has put food security firmly back in the agenda in a big way. This is because Ukraine and Russia are 2 of the biggest agricultural powerhouses in the world. Together they provide more than 1/3 of the world's wheat and barley and over half of the world's maize, sunflower oil and seeds. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has warned that the war in Ukraine has put 45 of the poorest countries at risk of a hurricane of hunger.
So, if there are concerns about food security, the first thing you might think is to produce more. And if you think of a country like a kitchen, it seems logical. When the cupboards are bare, buy more food. Can't buy more food, get out in the garden and make some yourself. But this is essentially the line that the Commission and the EU farmers are taking. In a recent communication, the EU executive presented a series of actions aimed at increasing the productivity of the sector. To give one example, the huge support package was partially funded by the never-before-triggered Crisis Reserve Fund, which will support the producers most affected by the serious consequences of the war in Ukraine.
The problem is, a kitchen isn't a good analogy for a country, because in fact the Commission has made it clear time and time again that, at least in the EU, there is enough food to go around.
Chcę raz jeszcze potwierdzić, że nie ma w tej chwili żadnego ryzyka w zakresie bezpieczeństwa żywnościowego w Unii Europejskiej, dla obywateli Unii Europejskiej. No jest problem niestety rosnących cen.
So it's not just what you've got, but what you do with it. Or, put simply, the issue here isn't that there's no food, it's that people might not be able to afford it. This means that food accessibility and not availability is arguably becoming the biggest concern. Now, this isn't to say that the risk of starvation through lack of access to food isn't very real. But the question is, if the key issue in the EU is accessibility, then why the push on production? Well, the problem is that the EU is very limited in its capacity to help on anything to do with affordability. As we explained before, the CAP was originally focused on production, so logically offers a range of production-orientated measures.
So, in conclusion, the EU might not be running out of food anytime soon, but the issue of food security for Europe's poorest still looms large.
The answer lies in a multi-pronged attack. Strong social policies combined with management of food markets and commodity prices. But unfortunately, in many of these areas, the EU's powers are limited.